Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another recap series. This time, a new tournament, Hart House Holidays Open. Uh, the last tournament I played in Ottawa, I made recaps for all the 5 rounds, and you guys were amazing. You were supporting all of the recaps, giving great feedback, and many of the people asked me to do this more. So I decided to keep this tradition of doing recaps of my tournaments. And I decided to do this for my tournament that I just played this weekend in Hart House in Toronto. So this tournament was a little bit harder than the previous tournament in the sense that everyone in the section was above 2200 Canadian rating or above 2000 FIDE. So basically everyone in this section was super competitive and every game was a fight. So the games will be even more instructive and more interesting compared to the last tournament, at least to some extent. So coming to this tournament, I was a little bit scared to be honest, because when you go to such a field, everyone is good, everyone is above 2200 CFC, then if the tournament doesn't start well, like if you get into a losing streak, then it's very difficult to stop it because literally everyone is decent. It's not like you're going to get a free game that you can just win and get back your confidence. So that's one of the challenges of playing in such fields. And before the first round, so the pairings came out very late. Like I got to the playing venue and then I saw my pairing. Before the round, I was mostly preparing for someone who took a bye in the first round. I was predicting that I might face him, but he took a bye, and then I faced Michael Dougherty, a very experienced FIDE Master, one of the very experienced Canadian players. And I never played Michael before, so it was a very interesting experience to play against him. So when you play against more experienced players as opposed to younger kids who just broke into higher levels, you're facing different types of challenges. Like usually kids are much better in opening prep, like they have like a lot of coaches, they work a lot on their chess. While on the other hand, when you face a more experienced player, they usually have that understanding of a FIDE master, 2300 FIDE, um, and they just didn't have that much practice in recent years. So I won't necessarily say which one is harder and which one is easier, but it's the fact that you'll face a different type of challenge when facing when facing little kids as opposed to more experienced players. So uh, I just saw the pairings like 20 minutes before the round. I did a very quick prep, like just looking at some lines, and my plan was to start with e4, of course. And I saw he recently played some Sicilian and some modern with g6, but he played e6 in the game. He played the French, and I don't know what's up with my opponents recently. Everyone is playing French against me these days. Like with this game, this is the third game in a row that I'm facing French, and none of the players that played French against me were maining French in recent years, which is kind of interesting. Like people are targeting me in French apparently, and I guess it's something to look for and improve on because I'm facing a lot of French, so I gotta improve my repertoire there. So I played d4, he played d5, and here I decided to play this line with bishop d3. So I know two lines against the French, knight d2 and bishop d3. Sometimes I play other stuff like knight c3 and e5 as well, but these are the two things that I'm the most comfortable with. And bishop d3 is a more aggressive and surprising line. Like knight d2 is a more principled, solid, but bishop d3 is more aggressive and it's usually a good surprise weapon. So given the fact that my opponent was not a mainline French player, like he wasn't someone who only plays French for like 20 years and knows every single detail, I decided to go with bishop d3 and I was hoping to catch him out of prep. So he played c5, which is one of the best lines, and I took on d5. So far we are both playing pretty quickly. And here he takes ed5, which is by far the best move. You might ask, why not queen takes d5? Looks like queen takes d5, is a really good move. Attacking the pawn on g2 and attacking the pawn on d4. It looks like white might be actually in trouble. But the idea is that I played a move knight c3, attacking the queen on d5. And now, if he takes on g2, bishop e4 just traps the queen. It's insane that how all these pieces combine to control all the squares of the queen, and the bishop defends the rook. So black will just lose instantly if they take on g2. And if they take on d4, now white gets a lot of initiative. I go knight b5, attacking the queen and the square on c7. If they go back, now bishop f4, threatening knight c7. And now if they go knight a6, now queen e2 comes. And now with long castle coming, white just has an overwhelming initiative. White developed all their pieces, they're going to castle, and black's pieces are still super underdeveloped. So yeah, and my opponent took on d5 with a pawn, which is the best move. I played knight f3, he played knight c6, and now I castle. So here, there are two approaches to play this position. One approach is to push c4, and one approach is to keep the tension in the center. And my opponent chose the second approach with knight f6. So if he plays c4, the downside for me is that I will lose a tempo with a bishop. I already played bishop d3, now I have to go bishop e2 back. But the plus for me is that after knight f6, I can go b3. And now the only way to protect this pawn is to trade it off. And once he trades it off, now I get the open A file and a better control over the center with my pawns. So at some point right now, or maybe in the future, I can go with c4 and I will enjoy a slight edge in this position. But it's still a long fight ahead, of course. Like black also has a lot of activity here. My opponent played knight f6, and now I gave this check on e1. And here's the point. If my opponent blocks with a light squared bishop, then I will have knight g5 ideas, trying to exploit the pin on the e file. But if he plays the better move, which is bishop e7, now I can take on c5. So you might think the point is just to win the pawn and try to cling into it, but this is actually impossible. He just castles, and I can't really cling into the pawn, because if I go bishop e3, he's going to go knight g4, attacking my bishop. And if I really want to keep that pawn with queen c1, then after queen a5, there's no way left to really defend this pawn. And black is fully equalized with the bishop here. And the dark square bishop is actually going to be pretty scary on this diagonal. So yeah, I can't really save this pawn. But the idea to force this bishop to e7 is that black basically wastes a tempo to win the pawn back. So they play bishop e7 first, and then they take on c5, as opposed to just taking on c5 in one go. So I played knight b3, attacking the bishop, and he played bishop d6. I was more expecting bishop b6, but one problem with bishop b6 is that with my rook already on e1, I can always think about ideas with bishop e3 to trade off the dark squared bishops. And once I do that, I can establish a nice blockade of an isolated queen's pawn on b5. He played bishop d6, and the idea of bishop d6 is that he's trying to use the IQP to provide more activity for his pieces, and then try to attack me on this side of the board with active pieces. So usually in these positions, black wants to play bishop g4. So I decided to play the move h3, stopping bishop g4, and now it's kind of difficult for black to find a nice square for the bishop. So here I was feeling a little bit comfortable. I have a long-term weakness to play against, and next I'm going to go like c3, knight bd4, block the IQP, and once I consolidate, start trading some minor pieces, and in the end game, this is going to become a weakness. Once the pressure against my king fizzles out, I'm the one playing for the win here. But the game takes a completely different route, as you see. So here he spent a lot of time, and he played the move knight e4, which I thought it was very interesting. So he puts the knight on a very active square, and I can't really take it, because if I play bishop takes e4, d4, rook e4, he has this nice tactic with bishop h2 check, winning my queen on d1. So the knight is not takeable yet, and here initially, I was thinking about the move bishop e3. But after a while, I started getting scared of the move queen f6, because it attacks the pawn on b2. And if I want to play a move like knight bd4 or knight fd4, then queen g6, and all of a sudden, with the bishops pointing towards my king, a queen here, and knight blocking my bishops, I wasn't feeling comfortable playing this position. Even knight fd4, queen g6 is going to be the same. In fact, black is even better here with some f5, f4 ideas coming, attacking my king. So this move is actually good because after queen f6, I have this insane move c4, which I saw the idea in the game. That's the move that I actually played. In this position, I played the move c4 after a long think. We will get to that. But after bishop e3, queen f6, c4 is even stronger. It looks as though it's not that strong, though, because he's going to go bishop e6. And if I take, now he takes back, and he gets two strong bishops in the center. But now I have this interesting move, bishop to c2. And all of a sudden, black is in deep trouble. All of the black's pieces are shaky here. So I'm threatening to take on d5, creating a fork. And if he takes on c4, I take the knight, he takes on b3, and now the bishop on d6 is hanging. And that's a big issue, because he already committed to queen f6. And if he tries to do something like rook fd8, trying to go with bishop h2 ideas, I can still take on d5. And I can actually sack my queen. So the point is, I will win 3 pieces for the queen, but usually, as a rule of thumb, when you have 3 minor pieces against the queen, the pieces need coordination, and the queen needs weaknesses. And here I don't have any weaknesses. My king is very safe. My pieces are well coordinated in the middle of the board, and the queen can't really do much. So white is basically close to winning in this position. Anyways, I didn't actually really see c4 after bishop e3, so when I saw these queen f6, queen g6 ideas, I was a little bit scared. So I decided to play the move c4, which is a very interesting way to play the position. It's not usually in my style. I usually like to grind these long-term advantages, but this time I decided to go for a more dynamic advantage. And my opponent made a mistake by playing dc4. The best that he had, which I also missed in the game, was the move bishop e6. And it's actually pretty simple, because if I take on d5, he takes back. Looks as though the knight is hanging, but still, even though everything is on the d file, after a while, everything gets cleared up, and again, I lose my queen on d1. So I can't really touch the knight. And here, black is fully equalized. The best I had was bishop e3, but then after bishop e4, we have an extremely complicated position where actually I need to be careful. If I go rook f1, apparently there are ideas where black can sack the knight on f2 and then take on c4, getting rid of the weak knight on e4 already. So I didn't see bishop e6, and my opponent also didn't, so he took on c4. But now, after bishop e4, c b3, queen b3, we get this super symmetrical structure. So the pawn structure is completely symmetrical now. There's no more weakness on d5. But now I have a dynamic advantage. I have this super active pieces and a lead in development. So now the problems that black have, first of all, they don't have a knight defending their king on this side of the board. So I can always put pressure with my pieces towards his king with all the pieces on the queen side. And second, it's a little bit of a struggle to develop this light squared bishop. For instance, if they go bishop e6, queen d7 is going to come, and they're going to lose material. So my opponent played queen c7, defending the pawn on b7, and getting ready to play bishop e6. Very normal move. Computer actually likes bishop b4, and the idea of bishop b4 is to kind of stop bishop d2, which is the move that I played next. So I play rook d1, queen e7, queen c2, and as you can see, I can always keep making some threats. And the line will probably go something like h6, I kick this bishop out with tempo, and I play bishop b2. Now after bishop e6, black already completed their development, but there's still going to be some sort of struggle. Like for instance, if I go queen c3, they have to go f6, weaken these light squares. Like black is not fully equalized yet, but they at least get to develop all of their pieces. Anyways, my opponent played queen c7, which was the most normal move to me. And here I spent a very long time. I was thinking what to do first and what to do next. Like here it was a very challenging position. I was thinking about all sorts of ideas. So initially I was even thinking about ideas like knight g5, attacking the pawn on h7. And after h6 I was thinking, what if I sack the knight on f7? Of course, they can't take with a queen. because bishop d5 comes. But if they take with a rook, and if I go bishop d5, now they simply go bishop f5, and they complete their development, and I'm actually in a losing position because I simply don't have anything to show for it. And if I go bishop g6, still bishop f5 comes. And the point is, I can't really take this bishop. Looks as though I can because of the pin, but then there's knight d4, attacking the queen and the bishop. So I really don't have knight g5 working here in this position. So I realized that this is not going to work. So yeah, I realized knight g5 is not going to work here. So I started thinking how to develop my bishop. Should I go bishop e3? Should I go bishop d2? Should I go bishop g5? Should I start with queen c2, provoking h6? Like, there are all sorts of move orders here. And the thing about my sort of advantage in this position is that it's very volatile. Like, when you have a dynamic advantage, sometimes you can play 2 or 3 normal moves, and then your opponent just consolidates, and everything just evaporates, and you got to settle for a draw. Like, if he gets to play bishop e6, bring the rooks in the middle, then literally everything is going to get traded in these open files, and we're going to shake hands. So I got to be really careful here. I found the best move, bishop d2. So first, the idea of bishop d2 is that I open the square for my rook, so now I can put some pressure on the c file. And the bishop can also come to c3 to exert more pressure on this side of the board as well. So my opponent played h6, very normal move, because this is the move that he has to play at some point, because I will play queen c2, queen d3, knight g5, something, and he has to play h6 at some point, so he did it now. And here I missed an idea for 2 consecutive moves. I played very natural moves, in my opinion, but I missed a very nice idea, which was pretty instructive. So I played rook a1, the most natural move, putting pressure on the c file, and in some lines, I was thinking maybe I can somehow trade something on c6, like trade everything on c6, and then just grind a better structure with a weakness on c6 once they take back with a pawn. Or maybe even win a pawn here at some point. Very normal looking move, bringing the last piece into the play too. But I had this insane idea of bishop c2. So the idea of bishop c2 is very simple. I want to play queen d3. And the point is, he's already committed to h6. So if I play queen d3, and they go g6 to stop mate, now I can simply take the pawn. So let's say they go rook d8, stopping queen d3 in the view of bishop h2. Now I can go queen a4. Now I'm threatening queen e4. And how can they even stop it? There's no good way to really stop queen e4. Of course, you don't want to go f5 and just weaken your king with no pieces around it. So you got to develop, and now after queen e4, queen h7 is coming, so he has to go g6. Now I take the pawn, and I'll be up a full pawn, completely healthy pawn in this position. I did not see that. I played rook a1, and my opponent played bishop d7, and the reason these moves are inaccuracies are exactly because of the same idea. They're all normal looking moves, but again, computer likes the move bishop f4, closing down this diagonal of the bishop, and that comes from stopping this idea with bishop c2, queen d3, because there, after g6, this bishop gets dangerous with bishop takes h6. So like here, I guess my opponent was really worried of this line takes, bishop c6, bc6, rook c6. But the thing is, after bishop e6, even though black is down a pawn, black is fully at least equalized in position, and the bishop is stronger than the knight because pawns are on both sides, and the rooks are going to come into the game. So black will have excellent holding chances. But from a practical point of view, it's always difficult to give up a pawn in the game and convince yourself that you're giving away material. So I understand why my opponent didn't go for it. My opponent tried to cling into the pawn with bishop d7. And here again, I had the same idea, bishop c2 with queen d3. And the thing is, if I do this, then g6 is met by bishop h6 yet again. And like moves like bishop f4 are definitely not going to work here because queen d3, g6 I take, and bishop 1d7 is going to hang. So there's no good way to stop queen d3 actually, and I'm going to have a decisive advantage. But I played bishop d5, which looks normal again, putting pressure on f7, tying this rook down to the defense of the f7 pawn. And at some point, I was thinking about ideas like going queen a4, knight d4, and maybe winning a pawn, or in the worst case, compromising his pawn structure to so that he has another weakness to worry about. And it would have made the life more difficult for him. So he played bishop f5. And at this point, I was starting to think what to do. Like, should I put the queen on a4? Should I put the queen on c4? I really wanted to put more pressure on his pieces here like this. So I was debating between these two moves, but I chose queen c4 over queen a4. Queen a4 looks more normal, but I chose queen c4 because I didn't want to, in case this bishop comes back, I didn't want the knight to x-ray my queen. And I also wanted to create this pin on the c file. Like, it's tough to understand because, like, queen a4 is also a good move. I don't exactly remember why I did queen c4, but something along the lines of bishop d7 stuff scared me a little bit. And I also maybe want to keep the pressure on the f7 pawn. It just felt good for me. It was an okay move. Like, all the moves are pretty close. He played rook a c8, defending the knight on c6. And here, I found the best move. Here I found the best move, which is knight to h4. Brilliant move. Initially, my plan was to go knight d4. And I saw this line where, so I'm attacking the bishop and the knight on c6. And if the bishop goes back, I can take on c6. And after bc6, just drop the bishop back. And obviously, white has more activity and a better structure now. It's still holdable for black, but extremely unpleasant to play. I also saw this line with knight d4, queen d4. And I was thinking, okay, if he goes queen b6, I can trade the queens and win a healthy pawn on b7. But if he goes back, now bishop c3 is very strong, threatening mate, and the pawn is also pinned, so there's no good way to defend against it. But then I saw that he has this move bishop c5, and that kind of diminished my my desire to go for this. I didn't want to like trade the knights and make the game simpler and getting one step closer to a draw or a tenable endgame. So I decided not to go with knight d4 and play knight h4. And here's the idea. So there are three ways to defend a bishop. If he goes bishop d7, he instantly loses to knight g6, exploiting the pin, attacking the rook, and the pawn on f7 is gonna hang. And the best move, in my opinion, was to go queen d7, accepting the fact that you're gonna give up the bishop here and play this position. And this position is also extremely unpleasant because bishop here is extremely good in an open position. This is a completely open position, and obviously bishop here is going to dominate here. And of course, there are still some weaknesses to deal with, like the b7 pawn. My rooks are more active. Like, maybe a computer can hold this, but from a human's perspective, I don't like this position at all for black. So my opponent played bishop h7, keeping an eye on the g6 square. But now comes the next move, queen g4, threatening to take the pawn on h6. And here it's already starting to get a little bit ugly for my opponent. So I'm threatening to take on h6. And the only good way to really defend against it is to play king h8. And then I play bishop c3, threatening the checkmate on g7. They can't really go rook g8 because then knight f5 ideas will come. And the pressure is going to be even more on g7. So he has to go something like f6. But now I get the bishop here, and they have all these light squared weaknesses. With bishop e4 coming, like, even if black plays all the best moves, it's objectively lost here because of all these weaknesses and my strong light squared bishop here. So understandably, my opponent tried to go for something cute. He played bishop h2 check, and I played king h1 pretty quickly. And he played the move queen d6, which is the losing blunder of the game. So his idea was to skewer my bishops like this, and hoping for some lines, like he was telling me after the game that he was hoping for some lines like bishop takes h6. Now if he takes with a queen on h6, I can't take the bishop on h2 because there's a queen d6 check, winning the bishop. And if I do something like what was the line? I think it was something like bishop takes c6, I believe. Yeah, I think it was something like this. But then he was planning to go something like bishop f4 and creating this pin on the c file. So he was telling me about his ideas that he saw against bishop takes h6. In fact, this actually doesn't work due to bishop takes f7, which both of us overlooked. They can't take with a rook because the rook on c8 is hanging, and if they take with a king, then queen c4 check is deadly. I actually saw the same idea a little bit further though. So he played queen d6, and I was like, okay, bishop h6 is a little bit messy, but I saw a very easy win, bishop c3. So now I'm threatening mate. I'm not even losing my bishop. And if he goes g5, now I saw that I have bishop takes f7 check. So if rook takes, then the rook on c8 hangs, and if king takes, queen c4 is literally checkmate, like in the next move. Like these pieces control all of the squares. So bishop f7 is deadly. So he decided to play bishop e5, but now I took the bishop simply. And now here's the point. The point is the rook on c8 is hanging. And that's basically, I think, what he missed. So my opponent here resigned the game. Pretty quick win in 23 moves. And the reason he resigned is that knight e5 is now met by queen takes c8. Of course, not rook takes c8 because knight takes g4 is going to come. But after queen c8, queen d5, I'm already up in exchange, and the easiest way to win is simply play knight f5, ignoring the threat. Black can never take. Now I'm creating the threats of my own on e7, and that was actually my idea to play if he had played on. And now he should either trade the queens or trade the bishop, and then it's going to be a pretty trivial win. So he didn't try to test me. He just resigned in this position. So let me insert this score here as well. So as you guys realized, this time I tried hiding the score to begin with so that you guys don't know what happened and make it more interesting. So I managed to win the first game pretty comfortably in 23 moves. But the nature of the position was something that could either go in a way that my opponent equalizes and just gets a draw, or he gets destroyed by the initiative. And the second thing fortunately happened in this game. And the initiative was too much to handle, and he couldn't find all the accurate moves, which was, of course, a very difficult thing to do. So pretty solid win. I won the game in like 2.5 hours. Pretty good to get a nice win against such a strong player, a strong FIDE Master, very experienced player in 23 moves. And heading into the next round with a lot of motivation. The pressure is now lifted. I already got a win. So I felt like I'm in a good form and I can make a run in this tournament. So make sure to share your comments about this game in the comments down below. Subscribe to the channel to be notified about the future recaps of the same tournament. I'm going to face even stronger players in the next rounds. And make sure to turn on the notification bell as well. Subscribe to the channel again, and give me all sorts of feedbacks in the comments below. So yeah, I won the first round. I will be back with a recap for the second round very soon. Thank you so much, guys, for watching. Really appreciate it, and see you soon. Goodbye.